I'm standing in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter so hard, my knuckles turn white, and Teresa's voice is like a knife, slicing through the air, sharp and furious, screaming at me, "Choose Vincent, it's her or me." One of us walks out that door tonight. My heart's pounding in my chest like it's about to explode, and I can't even look at her because I'm too busy staring at Vincent, my son, my boy, who's just sitting there, his face blank, like he's been punched in the gut, and doesn't know how to react. The whole family's frozen around the dining table. My daughter-in-law's parents, my sister, even the kids are wide-eyed, their forks stopped halfway to their mouths. Teresa's eyes are blazing, her hands balled into fists, and I feel this heat rising in me, this mix of rage and hurt, because how dare she put him in this position? How dare she make him choose between his mother and his wife in front of everyone? But I don't say anything. I just stand there waiting, because I know Vincent. I know he'll do the right thing. He always has. He doesn't look at me at first. His head's down, his hands folded on the table, and for a second, I think he's not going to say anything at all. But then he lifts his head and his eyes meet mine, and there's this look in them, guilt, pain, something I can't quite place. He opens his mouth and his voice is low, almost a whisper, but it cuts through the room like a gunshot. "Mom, you should go home." The words hit me like a freight train. My breath catches in my throat, and I feel this sharp twisting pain in my chest, like someone's reached in and ripped my heart out. I don't move. I don't speak. I just stare at him. My son, the boy I raised, the boy I poured every ounce of my love into, and I can't believe what I'm hearing. Teresa's standing there, her arms crossed, a smug look on her face, like she's won some kind of war. And I want to scream. I want to grab her by the shoulders and shake her, but I don't. I just stand there, my body trembling, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. I don't know how long I stand there, maybe a minute, maybe 10, but eventually I turn and walk toward the door. My legs feel like they're made of lead, each step heavier than the last, and I can feel every eye in the room on me burning into my back. I don't look at anyone. Not Vincent, not Teresa, not my sister, nobody. I just grab my coat from the rack, slip it on, and walk out into the Colorado night, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. The door closes behind me, and I'm alone. Before I dive into this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. My name's Abigail. I'm 62 years old, and this is the story of how my family fell apart and how I made the hardest decision of my life. It didn't start that night, not really. The tension between me and Teresa had been building for years, like a storm you can see coming, but can't do anything to stop. When Vincent first brought her home, I was thrilled. She was smart, funny, beautiful, and she made him happy. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room. I welcomed her with open arms, invited her to family dinners, helped plan their wedding, even gave them money for the down payment on their house. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Teresa started pulling away, making little comments about how I was too involved, how I was always around, how I needed to give them space. I didn't understand it at first. I was just trying to be a good mom, a good mother-in-law. I'd bring over casseroles, offer to watch the kids, help with whatever they needed. But every time I did, she'd get this look on her face like I was intruding, like I was the enemy. It wasn't just me either. My sister Linda noticed it too. She'd come over for coffee, and we'd talk about how Teresa was always so cold, so distant. Linda would say, "Abigail, she's jealous of you. She sees how close you and Vincent are, and she can't stand it." I didn't want to believe it. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that I was being too sensitive. But then there were the fights, little ones, at first over stupid things, like how I folded the laundry or how I disciplined the kids. Teresa would snap at me, and I'd try to stay calm, but it was like she was looking for a reason to push me away. Vincent was always caught in the middle trying to keep the peace, but I could see it wearing on him. He'd call me later, apologize, say Teresa was just stressed, that she didn't mean it. And I'd forgive her every time, because I didn't want to lose my son. But that night, that dinner, it was different. It wasn't just a fight. It was an explosion. We were all there for Vincent's birthday. The whole family packed into their dining room laughing, eating, trying to pretend everything was fine. But you could feel the tension, like a rubber band stretched too tight, ready to snap. Teresa had been drinking, which didn't help. She was louder than usual, her laugh sharper, her comments more pointed. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the kids, asking them about school. But then she started in on me. It was something small at first. I don't even remember what. Maybe I said something about the food, or maybe I offered to help clean up. Whatever it was, she took it as an attack, and before I knew it, she was standing up her chair, scraping against the floor, yelling about how I was always meddling, always trying to control everything, always acting like I was better than her. I tried to stay calm. I said, "Teresa, I'm not trying to control anything. I'm just here for Vincent's birthday." But she wasn't listening. She was too far gone, her face red, her voice shaking. "No, Abigail, you're always here. You're always in our business, always telling us what to do, always acting like you're the perfect mother. I'm sick of it." I felt my own anger rising, but I bit my tongue because I didn't want to ruin the night, didn't want to make a scene in front of the kids. But then she said it, the thing that broke me. "You're the reason this family is falling apart. You're the reason Vincent and I fight all the time. If you weren't here, we'd be fine." That's when I lost it. I stood up, my hands shaking, and I said, "Teresa, that's enough. You don't get to talk to me like that. I've done nothing but try to help you, to be there for you, and this is how you treat me." It was like a dam broke. We were both yelling now, throwing words at each other like weapons, and the whole room was just watching, nobody knowing what to do. Vincent tried to step in, saying, "Please, both of you stop," but Teresa wasn't having it. She turned to him, her eyes wild, and that's when she said it. "Choose Vincent. It's her or me. One of us walks out that door tonight." I don't know what I expected him to do. Maybe I thought he'd tell her to calm down, to stop being ridiculous. Maybe I thought he'd stand up for me, his mother, the woman who raised him, who loved him more than anything. But he didn't. He just sat there, his head in his hands, and then he looked at me and said those words, "Mom, you should go home." I don't remember much after that. I remember walking out, the cold air, hitting me, the sound of the door closing behind me. I remember getting in my car, driving back to my house, the tears streaming down my face, blurring the road. I remember sitting in my living room, staring at the walls, trying to understand how it had come to this. My son, my Vincent, had chosen her. He'd chosen Teresa over me. And it wasn't just about that night, it was about everything. All the years, all the love, all the sacrifices, and in that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. But I wasn't going to let it end like that. I wasn't going to let Teresa win, to tear my family apart, and walk away like nothing happened. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to my safe, pulled out the deed to their house. The house I'd paid for, the house I'd given them as a wedding gift, and I put it in an envelope. I wrote a note, just a few lines, and slipped it inside. The next morning, I drove back to their house, left the envelope on their kitchen table, and walked away. The note said, "I'm gone. Live well. But I'll never forgive you." The days after that night were like walking through fog, everything blurry and heavy, like I was moving through someone else's life. I didn't call Vincent, didn't text him, didn't reach out to anyone in the family. I just stayed in my house, going through the motions, making coffee, watching television, trying to pretend I wasn't falling apart inside. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that look in his eyes when he told me to go, and it was like a knife twisting in my gut. I kept replaying the fight in my head, wondering what I could have done differently, what I could have said to make him see that Teresa was tearing us apart. But the truth was, he'd made his choice, and I had to live with it. About a week later, my sister Linda showed up at my door, her face all serious, holding a grocery bag full of my favorite snacks, like she was on some kind of mission to cheer me up. She hugged me tight and said, "Abigail, you can't just hide in here forever. You need to talk to Vincent. He's your son." I shook my head, told her I wasn't ready, that I didn't even know what to say. She sat me down on the couch, poured us both some tea, and told me what she'd heard from our cousin who'd talked to Vincent's best friend. Apparently, Things at their house were a mess. Teresa was acting like nothing happened going on with her life, posting happy family photos online, but Vincent was different. He was quiet, withdrawn, barely talking to anyone. Linda said he's hurting Abigail. He knows he messed up. I didn't want to hear it. I was still too angry, too hurt to care about how Vincent was feeling. I told Linda about the envelope, about the deed, and the note, and her eyes went wide. You gave them the house, just like that. I nodded. Explained how I'd paid for it years ago, how it was my gift to them, but now it felt like a chain around my neck, tying me to a family that didn't want me. Giving it to them was my way of cutting that chain of letting go. Linda just stared at me, then said, "You're stronger than I am, Abigail." I would have burned that deed before I let her have it. I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like I'd given away a piece of myself and had nothing left. But I didn't tell Linda that. I just sipped my tea and changed the subject, asking about her kids, anything to keep from talking about Vincent. But deep down, I knew she was right. I couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to face him, face what happened, face the fact that my family wasn't what it used to be. A few days later, I got a call from Vincent. I was in the middle of folding laundry, and when I saw his name on my phone, my heart stopped. I didn't want to answer, but something in me wouldn't let me ignore it. I picked up, and his voice was soft, almost broken. "Mom, can we talk? Please." I didn't say much, just told him to come over, and an hour later, he was at my door, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes red, his shoulders slumped. He sat on my couch, his hands clasped between his knees, and for a long time, he didn't say anything. I didn't either. I just waited, my arms crossed, my heart racing. Finally, he looked up and said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I didn't want to choose." His voice cracked, and I could see he was fighting back tears, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. I said, "Vincent, you did choose. You chose her. In front of everyone, you told me to leave my own son's house." He flinched like I'd slapped him and started talking fast, trying to explain. He said Teresa had been under a lot of pressure, that she felt like I was always judging her, that she was scared of losing him. He said he didn't know what to do in that moment, that he just wanted the fighting to stop. "I thought if you left it would calm things down," he said. "I didn't think it would be forever." I listened, but every word felt like an excuse, like he was trying to justify something that couldn't be justified. I said, "Vincent, you're my son. I've always been there for you. And you let her humiliate me. You let her win." He didn't have an answer for that. He just sat there, his head in his hands, and I could see he was torn, caught between his love for me and his loyalty to Teresa. I wanted to hug him, to tell him it was okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked about the envelope. I said, "Did you open it? Did you read the note?" He nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, Mom. We got the deed. And the note. Teresa, she didn't know what to make of it. She thought you were trying to guilt us." That stung. Of course she'd think that. Teresa always saw the worst in me, always assumed I had some ulterior motive. I said, "Vincent, I gave you the house because I don't want to be tied to you and Teresa anymore. I want you to have it to build your life. But I meant what I said in that note. I can't forgive you for what you did." He looked up at me, his eyes wide, and for a moment, I thought he was going to argue, to beg me to take it back. But he didn't. He just nodded and said, "I understand, Mom. I don't want to lose you." We talked for a while after that, but it wasn't the same. There was this distance between us, this wall that hadn't been there before. He promised to make things right, to talk to Teresa, to figure out a way to fix our family, but I wasn't sure I believed him. When he left, I felt a little lighter, but not much. The hurt was still there, deep and raw, and I didn't know if it would ever go away. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Linda. She'd heard from another cousin that Teresa was spreading a story around town, saying I'd abandoned the family and left the house out of spite. I couldn't believe it. I called Linda right away, my voice shaking, as I told her what Vincent had said about Teresa's reaction. Linda was furious, saying, "That girl's got some nerve, Abigail. She's rewriting history to make herself look good. I agreed, but I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't want to get into a public fight, didn't want to drag the kids into more drama, so I decided to let it go for now. A few days later, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store, someone who'd known Vincent since he was a kid. She asked me about the fight, her voice cautious, like she wasn't sure if she should bring it up. I gave her a quick rundown, keeping it vague, but she shook her head and said, "Teresa's been telling people you forced Vincent to pick sides." "It's not fair, Abigail." That hit me hard. I thanked her for letting me know, grabbed my groceries, and drove home, my mind spinning. I wondered if Teresa was trying to turn the whole town against me, if she was building a narrative to justify what she'd done. That afternoon, I decided to call Vincent again. I needed to know where he stood, if he was buying into Teresa's version of events. He picked up after a few rings, and his voice was hesitant. "Mom, I heard what people are saying. I didn't tell Teresa to spread that stuff." I swear. I believed him, but it didn't erase the sting. I said, "Vincent, I don't care what she's telling people. I just need to know you're not believing it." He assured me he wasn't, that he knew the truth, but I could hear the strain in his voice. He was still caught in her web, still trying to balance her anger with his guilt. Over the next week, the rumors kept growing. I'd hear whispers at the post office, see people I'd known for years, give me strange looks. It was exhausting, and I started avoiding going out, staying home more, letting Linda handle the errands. One evening, she came over with takeout, sat me down, and said, "Abigail, you can't let her win like this. You need to fight back at least a little." I didn't know how. I wasn't the type to confront people publicly, but Linda had an idea. She suggested I write a letter to a few close family friends, explaining my side without getting into a war with Teresa. I wasn't sure, but I agreed to think about it. The letter took me 2 days to write. I kept it simple, just stating the facts, the fight, the choice, the deed, and how I'd walked away to give them peace. I sent it to about 10 people, people I trusted, and by the end of the week, I started getting calls. Some were supportive, saying they understood my pain. Others were neutral, just wanting to hear my voice. One call, though, came from Teresa's mother. She was upset, saying, "Abigail, why are you stirring things up again? Teresa's trying to move on." I was taken aback, told her I wasn't stirring anything, that I was just defending myself. She hung up, and I felt a pang of regret, wondering if I'd made things worse. Meanwhile, Vincent kept coming by. Each visit was tense, filled with awkward silences and half-finished apologies. He'd bring the kids sometimes, and I'd focus on them playing games or reading stories, trying to keep some normalcy alive. But every time he left, I'd feel that distance growing, like he was pulling away to protect himself from the mess he'd created. One day, he showed up alone, holding a small box. He handed it to me, saying, "Mom, this is from the house. I thought you might want it back." Inside was a silver necklace I'd given him for his high school graduation. Seeing it brought a lump to my throat, and I couldn't help but ask, "Why now, Vincent?" He looked down, mumbled something about Teresa finding it, and left quickly. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a crack in the wall between us. As weeks turned into a month, the town gossip started to die down, but the damage was done. I'd lost some friends, gained some pity, and felt more isolated than ever. Linda kept pushing me to reach out to Vincent more, to force a reconciliation, but I wasn't ready. I needed time to figure out who I was outside of being his mom. One night, I sat down with a journal, something I hadn't done in years, and started writing everything down: the fight, the hurt, the hope. It was messy, raw, but it helped. I realized I couldn't control what Teresa did or said, but I could control how I moved forward. By the end of the second month, I got a surprising call from Vincent's old college roommate, Mark. He'd heard about the situation through mutual friends and wanted to check on me. We talked for over an hour, and he shared how Vincent had confided in him, saying he regretted that night more than anything. Mark suggested I give Vincent a chance to prove himself, maybe meet somewhere neutral. I wasn't sure, but the idea stuck with me. I decided to invite Vincent to a local diner, a place with no history, no baggage. When he showed up, he looked nervous, but determined, and for the first time, I felt like we might start to rebuild slowly, cautiously, but with a glimmer of possibility. A couple of weeks later, things took another turn, and this time it was Teresa who stirred the pot. I was at the grocery store, minding my own business, when I ran into my old friend Carol, who lives down the street from Vincent and Teresa. She pulled me aside, her face all serious, and said, "Abigail, have you talked to Vincent lately? There's something going on at their house." My stomach dropped, and I asked her what she meant. She told me she'd seen Teresa yelling at Vincent in their front yard, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, saying things like, "You're spineless. You can't even stand up to your own mother." Carol said it wasn't the first time either. Apparently, Teresa had been on edge ever since the fight, snapping at everyone, even the kids. I didn't know what to think. Part of me felt vindicated, like maybe Teresa was finally showing her true colors. But another part of me was worried about Vincent. I called Linda that night, told her what Carol said, and she was furious. "That woman is toxic, Abigail," she said. "She's not just pushing you out, she's tearing Vincent down too. You need to do something." I didn't know what something was supposed to be. I'd already given them. The house, walked away, tried to let go. What else could I do? But then Vincent called me again, and this time he sounded desperate. He said, "Mom, I need to see you. It's about Teresa." I told him to come over, and when he showed up, he looked worse than before, pale, exhausted, like he was carrying the weight of the world. He told me everything. He said Teresa had been furious about the deed, not because she was grateful, but because she thought it was some kind of power play. She'd screamed at him for hours, saying I was trying to control them, that I was using the house to make her look bad. Vincent said, "She's obsessed with you, Mom. She thinks everything's about you, and it's driving her crazy." I was stunned. I'd given them the house to set them free, to let them live their lives without me hovering, and somehow Teresa had twisted it into something ugly. I said, "Vincent, I don't know what she wants from me. I've done everything I can to make her happy, and it's never enough." He nodded, his eyes on the floor, and said, "I know, Mom. I don't know what to do anymore. I love her, but I don't know if I can keep doing this." That was the first time I realized how bad things had gotten between them. Vincent wasn't just caught in the middle, he was being torn apart. I wanted to tell him to leave her, to walk away, but I knew it wasn't that simple. He had kids, a life with her, and no matter how much she hurt him, he still loved her. So instead I said, "Vincent, you need to figure out what's best for you and the kids. I'll be here no matter what." He hugged me then, and for the first time since that night, I felt like maybe there was hope, like maybe we could find a way back to each other. But Teresa wasn't done. A few days later, she called me out of the blue, no warning. I was so shocked, I almost dropped the phone. Her voice was cold-clipped, like she was reading from a script. She said, "Abigail, we need to talk. Can you come over?" I didn't want to go, but something in her tone made me think I didn't have a choice. So I drove to their house, my stomach in knots, not knowing what to expect. When I got there, Teresa was alone, sitting at the kitchen table, the deed and my note spread out in front of her. She didn't offer me coffee or ask me to sit, just looked at me and said, "What's this supposed to mean, Abigail? You think you can just hand us the house and walk away like some kind of martyr?" I was taken aback, but I kept my voice steady. I said, "Teresa, I gave you the house because it's yours. I don't want anything from you. I just want you and Vincent to be happy." She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was bitter, almost cruel. "Happy? You think we're happy? You've been poisoning this family from the start, Abigail. You're the reason Vincent and I fight. You're the reason he's miserable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "Teresa, I've done nothing but try to support you. If you're not happy, that's not on me." She stood up, then her hands on the table, leaning toward me. "Don't play innocent. You've always wanted me gone. You've always wanted Vincent all to yourself." That was it. I'd had enough. I stood up too, looked her in the eye, and said, "Teresa, you're wrong. I wanted you to be part of this family. But you've pushed me away at every turn, and now you've pushed Vincent away too. If you want to blame someone, look in the mirror." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked out, my heart racing, my hands trembling, but I felt stronger than I had in weeks. For the first time, I'd stood up to her, and it felt good. The next day, Vincent called, his voice shaky. He said Teresa was a wreck after our talk, locking herself in their room, refusing to eat. He asked if I'd reconsider, maybe meet her again to clear the air. I wasn't sure I could face her so soon, but I agreed to think about it, telling him I needed time. That night, I couldn't sleep my mind, replaying our confrontation. I wondered if I'd been too harsh, if there was a way to bridge the gap, but the hurt from her words kept me from reaching out. A week later, I heard from Carol again. She'd seen Teresa at a local park, sitting alone on a bench, looking lost. Carol said she tried to talk to her, but Teresa brushed her off, muttering about how everyone was against her. It made me wonder if she was starting to feel the weight of her actions, if the fight was catching up to her too. I didn't know if I should feel sorry for her or stay firm, so I called Linda for advice. She said, "Abigail, she's digging her own hole. Let her figure it out, but don't let her pull you back into the mess." Meanwhile, Vincent's visits became more frequent. He'd bring updates how Teresa was struggling at work, how the kids were asking about me, how he was trying to hold everything together. One evening, he showed up with a photo album, flipping through pages of old family trips, birthdays, holidays. He pointed to a picture of us all at a lake, smiling, and said, "Mom, I miss this. I want us to get back there." It was the first time he'd opened up like that, and it stirred something in me, a flicker of hope, but also a reminder of how far we'd fallen. The tension in their house grew. I heard from a neighbor that Teresa had thrown a glass across the room during an argument, narrowly missing Vincent. He didn't mention it when he came by, but I could see the strain in his posture, the way he avoided my questions. I started to worry about the kids, wondering if they were safe in that environment. One afternoon, I drove by their house on my way to the store and saw the kids playing outside with a babysitter. Teresa, nowhere in sight. It worried me, but I didn't intervene, not yet. Then came a turning point. Vincent called late one night, his voice panicked. He said Teresa had packed a bag, saying she needed space, and left without telling him where she was going. He begged me to come over, and when I got there, the house was a mess. Dishes piled up, toys scattered, a broken lamp in the corner. Vincent was pacing the kids asleep upstairs. He broke down, admitting he didn't know how to fix things, that he was scared of losing her and me both. I stayed with him that night, helping clean up, talking until the sun rose, trying to give him some stability in the chaos. Over the next few days, Teresa didn't return. Vincent filed a missing person report, and the police got involved. I stayed close, taking the kids to school, making meals, while he dealt with the uncertainty. Rumors spread again. Some said she'd gone to her parents, others thought she'd left town entirely. It was a whirlwind, and I found myself stepping into a role I hadn't planned on, supporting Vincent through a crisis I hadn't caused. It was exhausting, but it also brought us closer, a silver lining in the storm. The next few months were a roller coaster, and not the fun kind. Vincent started coming over more, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone, and we'd talk for hours, trying to piece together what was left of our relationship. He told me things I didn't want to hear, about how Teresa was spiraling, how she was picking fights over nothing, how she'd started blaming him for everything, even things that had nothing to do with me. He said, "Mom, I don't know if I can stay with her. I love her, but she's not the person I married." Hearing him say that broke my heart, but it also made me angry, not at him, but at Teresa, for taking the man I raised and turning his life into a battlefield. I tried to be there for him, to listen without judging, but it was hard. Every time he talked about Teresa, I wanted to scream, "Why are you still with her? Why are you letting her do this to you?" But I didn't. I knew he had to figure it out on his own. Instead, I focused on the kids, taking them out for ice cream, helping with their homework, trying to give them some normalcy in the middle of all the chaos. They were confused, asking questions like, "Why's Mommy always mad?" or "Are you and Daddy fighting because of Grandma?" I didn't know how to answer them, so I just hugged them and said, "We're all trying to figure things out, but we love you." Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday, and I was at home gardening when Vincent called me, his voice shaking. He said, "Mom, I need you to come over. Now." I dropped everything and drove to their house, my mind racing, imagining the worst. When I got there, Vincent was outside, sitting on the porch, his head in his hands. The kids were with a neighbor, and Teresa was nowhere in sight. I sat next to him, put my hand on his shoulder, and said, "What happened?" He took a deep breath and told me. He said he'd confronted Teresa about her behavior, about how she was treating him, the kids, even me. He said he'd had enough, that he couldn't keep living like this. Teresa had lost it, screaming at him, throwing things, saying he was betraying her, that he was choosing me over her again. Vincent said, "I told her I wasn't choosing anyone. I told her I just wanted us to be a family." But she wouldn't listen. She packed a bag and left. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved, but another part was terrified for Vincent, for the kids, for what came next. I asked, "Where did she go?" He shook his head. "I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. She just said she needed space." We sat there for a long time, not talking, just letting the weight of it all sink in. Finally, I said, "Vincent, whatever happens, I'm here. We'll get through this together." He nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw a spark of hope in his eyes. The next few weeks were hard. Teresa didn't come back, but she didn't disappear either. She'd call Vincent, sometimes crying, sometimes yelling, saying she wanted to work things out, but every time he tried to talk to her, it ended in another fight. The kids were struggling, acting out at school, and Vincent was barely holding it together, trying to be both mom and dad while working full-time. I stepped in as much as I could, picking the kids up from school, cooking dinner, trying to keep things stable. But it was exhausting, and I could see the toll it was taking on all of us. Then one day, Teresa showed up at my house. I was in the middle of making dinner when the doorbell rang, and there she was, looking like she hadn't slept in days, her eyes red, her hair a mess. She didn't wait for me to invite her in, just walked past me and sat on my couch. I stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she said, "Abigail, I know you hate me. And maybe you're right too. But I'm not here to fight. I just want my family back." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to say she'd done enough damage. But another part of me saw the pain in her eyes, and for the first time, I realized she was just as broken as the rest of us. I sat down across from her and said, "Teresa, I don't hate you. I never did. But you've hurt Vincent, you've hurt the kids, and you've hurt me. If you want your family back, you have to fix what you broke." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and said, "I know. I'm trying. I just don't know how." We talked for a long time that night, and it wasn't easy. There was so much anger, so much hurt, but for the first time, it felt like we were actually hearing each other. She admitted she'd been jealous, that she felt like she could never measure up to me, that she was scared of losing Vincent. I told her I'd never wanted to take him away, that I just wanted to be part of their lives. By the end of the night, we weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. It was a start. The days after that meeting were tense. Vincent told me Teresa was seeing a therapist, trying to work through her issues, but she was still volatile. One afternoon, she called me again, asking if I'd meet her for coffee. I hesitated, but agreed, thinking it might be a step toward healing. We met at a small cafe downtown, and it was awkward at first. She apologized, her voice shaky, saying she'd been wrong to blame me, that her insecurities had taken over. I accepted her apology, but kept my guard up, unsure if she meant it, or if it was another manipulation. Over the next month, Teresa started reaching out, more small texts, occasional visits with the kids. It was slow, but it felt like progress. Vincent noticed too, saying she was calmer, more engaged with the family. I started to see glimpses of the woman Vincent had fallen for, the one who'd once laughed with us at family gatherings. But trust was hard to rebuild, and I kept my distance, letting her prove herself through actions, not just words. One evening, Vincent invited me to dinner at their house. It was the first time I'd been back since the fight, and I was nervous. Teresa greeted me at the door, her smile tentative, and the kids ran to hug me. The meal was quiet, but not hostile, and afterward, Teresa pulled me aside. She handed me a letter, saying, "I wrote this for you. I want you to know, I'm serious about changing. The letter was heartfelt, admitting her mistakes, asking for a chance to make amends. It moved me, but I told her it would take time, that forgiveness wasn't instant. She nodded, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope for our fractured family. The next year was about picking up the pieces, and let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. Teresa moved back in with Vincent, but it wasn't some fairy tale reunion. They went to counseling both together and separately, trying to figure out how to make their marriage work. There were good days when they'd laugh and act like a family again, and bad days when they'd fight, and I'd worry it was all falling apart. But they kept at it, and slowly things started to get better. I stayed involved, but I was careful. I didn't want to overstep, didn't want to give Teresa any reason to feel threatened. I'd come over for dinner once a week, play with the kids, talk to Vincent about his job, but I kept my distance from Teresa, letting her set the pace. She was different now, not perfect, but trying. She'd apologize when she snapped, thank me for helping with the kids, even ask for my advice sometimes. It was awkward, but it was progress. Vincent and I worked on our relationship too. We had a lot of long talks about the fight, about the choices he'd made, about how we could move forward. He said, "Mom, I know I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But I'm trying to be a better son, a better husband, a better dad." I believed him. He was still my boy, and I could see he was fighting for his family, for all of us. The kids were the ones who kept us going. They were so resilient, bouncing back from the chaos, laughing, and playing like kids do. I'd take them to the park, listen to their stories, and every time they hugged me, it felt like a little piece of my heart was healing. They didn't understand everything that had happened, but they knew we loved them, and that was enough. One day, about a year after Teresa came back, we had a family barbecue at their house. It was just us, me, Vincent, Teresa, the kids Linda, and a few cousins. We were in the backyard, the kids running around, the smell of burgers on the grill, music playing in the background. I was sitting with Linda, watching Vincent and Teresa laugh together, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be. There were still scars, still moments when the past would creep up and sting. But we were together, and that was more than I dared to hope for. Teresa came over to me later, holding a glass of lemonade, and said, "Abigail, can I talk to you for a second?" I nodded, and we stepped away from the crowd. She looked nervous, twisting her hands, and then she said, "I just want to say thank you for not giving up on us." On me. I was surprised, but I smiled and said, "Teresa, we're family. That's what we do." She hugged me then, and it was quick, a little awkward, but it meant something. As I drove home that night, I thought about everything we'd been through, the fight, the envelope, the pain, the healing. I thought about the note I'd written, the one that said, "I'd never forgive them." I didn't feel that way anymore. I wasn't sure when it had changed, but somewhere along the way, I'd let go of the anger, the hurt. I didn't forget what happened, and I never would. But I'd chosen to move forward, to rebuild, to love my family, even when it was hard. That's the thing about family. It's messy, it's complicated, it's painful, but it's also worth fighting for. And as I pulled into my driveway, the Colorado stars bright above me, I knew I'd made the right choice. Not just for Vincent, not just for Teresa, but for me. Because at the end of the day, love isn't about keeping score. It's about showing up, even when it hurts, and saying, "I'm here." Let's try again. The months that followed the barbecue were a slow dance of rebuilding. Teresa and I started meeting for coffee once a month, at first just to check in. But soon we were sharing stories, hers about her childhood, mine about raising Vincent. It wasn't deep friendship, but it was a start. Vincent noticed the change, thanking me one day for giving her a chance. He said, "Mom, I think she's finally letting go of the jealousy. It's like she's seeing you differently." I hoped he was right, but I kept my expectations low, knowing trust was fragile. The kids thrived with the stability. They started doing better in school, joining soccer teams, and I'd cheer them on from the sidelines, Teresa and Vincent beside me. It felt like old times, but better because we'd fought through the worst to get there. One weekend, they invited me on a camping trip to the Rockies, a tradition we'd let lapse. Setting up tents, roasting marshmallows, listening to the kids' ghost stories, it was healing, a tangible sign we were moving forward. Teresa's therapy continued, and she shared with me one day how it had helped her see her patterns, how her insecurity had fueled the fight, how she'd projected her fears onto me. She asked if I'd join her for a session, just once, to clear the air with a professional. I agreed, nervous but willing. The therapist was kind, guiding us through a conversation where we both aired our grievances. It was raw, but it ended with a mutual agreement to let the past rest. Leaving that office, I felt lighter, like a weight had lifted. Vincent proposed a family Thanksgiving that year, the first since the fight. We invited Teresa's parents and a few close friends. The house was full, laughter echoing, and when Teresa and I cooked together, her handling the turkey, me, the pies, it felt like a milestone. Her parents thanked me quietly, admitting they'd misjudged me, and I saw a softening in their eyes. It wasn't forgiveness from them, but an acknowledgement, and that was enough. As winter set in, Vincent and Teresa talked about renewing their vows, a symbol of their renewed commitment. They asked me to help plan it, and I did, pouring myself into the details: flowers, music, a small ceremony in their backyard. The day was beautiful, the kids walking down the aisle with them, and when they exchanged vows, I cried, not just for them, but for us all. Teresa came to me after saying, "Abigail, you're part of this. Thank you." It was the closest we'd come to reconciliation, and I hugged her back, feeling the past fade just a little more. By spring, life had settled into a new rhythm. I started a small gardening club, with some neighbors finding joy in the dirt and flowers, a distraction from the lingering echoes of that night. Vincent and I took long walks, talking about his dreams, my memories building a bond stronger than before. Teresa joined us sometimes, and though it was still awkward, we managed small talk, shared smiles. The kids grew, the house filled with their laughter, and I realized we'd built something new. Not the old family, but a better one forged through fire. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, Vincent called. He said, "Mom, we're doing okay. Better than okay. And it's because of you." I smiled, tears in my eyes, and said, "I'm proud of you, Vincent. Of all of us." Hanging up, I looked at the stars, feeling the peace I'd fought for. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough to carry me. If this story hit you, check out the next one on your screen. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Thanks for being here.